We're Golden Sand Speedway for ASM Autocross Pursuit Battles. New style of autocross, kind of combining as close to wheel as we're ever going to get with autocross, really. We're going to start each of these cars opposite each other on the course, and each car will race back to its respective start line for a full lap on this continuous course. I think so. You just turn it on?
Yeah.
Check, check.
All the way at the end?
Yeah. So this one a little quieter, maybe. So in our first battle, we have Megan Kaler and Aaron Dukes side-to-side battle here in ASM Pursuit, and we've got a cone down already for Aaron Dukes in the RSX. It's going to be a default win to Megan Kaler. Sorry for the microphone issues, but this format, again, a continuous course, race back to your own start line. A cone counts as a DNF, so the cone on Aaron Dukes is going to move him to the loser bracket. We're going to do a 32 battle double elimination style format here. And that will mean you have to be eliminated twice to get knocked out of this bracket. I missed the start of that run. Looks like we might be resetting for a go again. All right, Aaron Dukes in the RSX, Megan Kaler in the FRS. Looks like this is the pinch point for Aaron Dukes' side of the course. Megan Kaler already coming back to that start-finish line, but it looks like a slight advantage to Dukes. Kaler through the slow three-cone slalom, and Dukes is definitely ahead this time through, but now Kaler gets the quicker portion of the course into the three-cone slalom for Dukes. It's head-to-head. These were the closest qualifiers, but Vision takes it for Aaron Duke. So that will move us on to Braden Miller and Nick Murphy. Braden Miller and Nick Murphy. Braden in the Silver S2000, Nick Murphy in an 8th Gen Civic Si. Braden was your 5th qualifier through all of our qualifying runs. These drivers received 3 runs earlier in the day and were seeded into this essentially 14-car bracket. There's 16 positions, so our top 2 qualifiers, Andy Smedegard and Kevin Romanesco, will get byes in this first round. But again, Miller 5th, Nick Murphy was 12th, so the advantage theoretically goes to the S2000 driver. Doing a sighting lap of this brand new course. Some familiar elements some familiar elements from our earlier course, but a brand new route. And again, a continuous course where they will battle back to their own start line. With one battle in the books, it looks like the driver starting on the back straight starts to look like they're getting ahead until that 3-cone slalom that gets them slowed up right before the halfway point of the course. Tom Hilly on the start lights. We are blinking red, yellow, and green. They are go. Braden Miller gets a good launch. A little slow on the start for the Civic. Dueling VTEC noises ripped to life. And here comes Braden into that 3-cone slalom that really slows him down. The driver across the back straight, Murphy's going to get a really good run. Starts to look like he's getting ahead until he gets to that 3-cone slalom. Miller the first to the kink on Golden Sands turns 1 and 2. Miller with the advantage in the seating and Miller with the win on the course. He will advance to the second round of the winner's bracket, and that means we will see Aaron Dukes and Nick. So moving into our second battle for Miller and Nick Murphy. Miller with the win in round 1. Looks to be visibly ahead back to his own start line at the front straight of Golden Sands across the line, and that will be 2 wins for Braden Miller, which will keep him in the winner's bracket. And that means that Nick Murphy will go on to battle Aaron Dukes. Potentially one of our homewrecker battles here. We've got Jake and Jade Rusinski, husband and wife. Jade in the GR Corolla, Jake in the MX-5. Jake was feeling pretty confident about this one. The data goes his way. 4th qualifier in our qualifying rounds. Jade, 13th qualifier. But that all-wheel drive Corolla may be able to get off the line a little bit quicker than the MX-5. Definitely more modified for autocross here as we start battle number 1. Definitely an advantage visibly for the Corolla to get moving, but then has to check up immediately for the big kink in the middle of 1 and 2. Jake already back to our 3-cone slalom. Jade looks to be slightly ahead at this point, but we've seen that be common for the driver that starts on the start-finish straight. Jake now into the kink. Looks like he's taking it pretty careful on the cones. Jade is now into the 3-cone slalom, but Jake Rusinski's going to take the first battle here. They will come around to reset for a second battle. And if we do happen to have a tie, we'll see a one more time battle come back for this round, but advantage is to Jake in the MX-5, Jade in the Corolla. Let's see if she can take one back in this third battle of our first bracket. Yellow lights on and we're green. Launch for the Corolla. Looks a little better for the MX-5 this time though. He got a good launch with no axle hop. Around the high side for Jade in NASCAR, is it NASCAR or just Golden Sands, 3 and 4. Into the 3-cone slalom, Jake visibly ahead, a big head of steam through the back straight into the final corners for him. Jade still navigating the middle of turns 1 and 2. Jake is back well ahead and we'll move on to the second round of the winner's bracket. Jade will face off one of these next drivers in the loser's bracket. The next battle on deck, Tony Kavadik, your third place qualifier in the Corvette versus Nick Lemerond in the Civic Type R. Super different cars, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is Nick's first autocross ever, and was driving really well. We had 3 hours of practice and then 3 runs for qualifying, and that was able to give us these seeds. But 3 hours of practice, that's not very common for autocross. You may see the course 5, 6, 7 times maximum at most smaller events like this, but we gave 3 hours of open course, which meant even for his first event ever, Nick is well more experienced than a lot of autocrossers who do their first full season. Tony Kavadik, on the other hand, is a super experienced driver, very nicely prepped Corvette. Should pretty easily take this one as he's facing off against Nick in the basically the bottom qualifier position. Nick will get staged on the back straight. Tony coming around in the mean-looking Corvette onto the front straight. Lines are up nice and high, getting a good angle on that first corner into Golden Sands Speedway number 1. Nick on the back straight looking for yellows, and we're green. Good launch for the Civic, but obviously the horsepower of the Corvette is going to take the advantage right away over the high side for Kavadik, and now into the 3-cone slalom for Nick in the Civic Type R. Tony well ahead at this point, as we expected, but looks like Nick, a little hesitation through the midpoint of the course, a little bit of a confusing format for your first autocross, I'll give him that. Kavadik looks a little clunky as well, though. He's going to get back first easily, but he just learned something about the course that I think he will put to good use in the next round. Now these drivers will continue around into their next battle. Best 2 out of 3, or first one to win 2 will advance into the second round. All right, second battle in, this is round 5. Kavadik versus Lemerond. We are green. A little bit of a misshift for the Civic Type R. Big hesitation coming into the first corner. This course, even though it's the same in both routes, is going to feel very different depending on where you start. Kavadik a lot smoother through the 3-cone slalom, gets on the loud pedal into NASCAR 1. Speedway 1, I'll say, and then the Civic navigating the high side of Speedway 3 and 4. Kavadik is back first, but honestly, the Civic Type R put up a better fight that time through across the lights. Kavadik's going to advance into the second round against Jake Rusinski, and Jade Rusinski in a hot hatch battle will go up against Nick Lemerond in the Civic Type R. Next battle is battle number 6. Mike Vita is your 6th seed. Dan Simmons in the FRS is your 11th seed. As far as I can tell, this is basically a stock FRS on some tires, some nicer tires, versus another one of our super experienced drivers, Mike Vita, in the all-wheel drive Subaru. Now, it's interesting, we qualify on a course with a rolling start that doesn't necessarily incentivize launches, but this format does. And that all-wheel drive Subaru may come alive a little bit more. Again, only the 6th seed in competition through qualifying, but the all-wheel drive will definitely help more in this format than it did before. So we'll see what Mike Vita can pull out this time. He'll stage on the back straight for his first look at this course while we wait for Dan Simmons to come around to the start-finish line. It's a boxer battle for round number 6. Red lights are on, yellow, yellow, and we're green. All-wheel drive launch, Mike probably taking it easier to start with. Don't want to hurt the car too early, but big boost launch into the first corner for Mike Vita, already into the 3-cone slalom, while Dan Simmons is navigating the midway through his course. Vita visibly ahead already, and typically that would mean he will continue to pull ahead through the easier second portion of this course for Vita, while Simmons is going to enter the more difficult portion. Vita already done. Simmons still navigating that final slalom and will cross the line second in this first round. Moving on to the second battle. First one to win 2 will move on. Again, in this version of autocross, in this pursuit format, the first person to hit a cone is immediately the loser of that round, because inherently the second car has to come through that zone. Vita getting the Subaru up on boost just a little wheel spin, and then launches into Speedway 1. Simmons kind of doesn't stand a chance with the lack of power in the FRS there, down into Speedway 4. Vita already across the midway point, almost looking like he may catch Simmons this time through. Simmons clears the halfway point, so he's safe. Vita there navigating the final 3-cone slalom. 1, 2, and 3. Big push across the line, but he will take the win again. Simmons moves on to the first round of our losers consolation bracket. We'll call it a consolation bracket, not a losers bracket. And then Vita will move on to face off one of these drivers. This will be Dana Baczynski, the seventh seed of our bracket, versus Kirsten Miller in her son's, well, I guess it's still kind of hers, S2000. So this is an interesting scenario. There is a possibility that this silver S2000 will have to go against itself, in which case one driver will have to forfeit if, again, they end up in the same bracket on the same battle, a shared car in this case. And Dana Baczynski, not in his normal swapped FRS, but actually in an FA24 second-gen engine swapped FRS, built by ASM, just jumping in here at the last minute. So he will start as the higher seeded driver, 7th to versus 10th seed. So this should be a pretty close battle. Dana not getting a lot of seat time on these courses before qualifying. Actually, I don't think he got any before qualifying. So this means that it's kind of back to an easier square one than Kirsten Miller. Staged for the first of 2 battles, red, red, yellow, and we're green. Dana staged a little deep, or a little shallow that time, so he had a little bit further to go. Much more power swapped into this FRS that's now navigating Speedway 4 into the 3-cone slalom. Miller a little behind coming across the midway point, but she is ahead. This is looking pretty good for Kirsten Miller. Theoretically a little bit lower seated, but now she has the slower finish to navigate in the 3-cone slalom. Baczynski making up time back. Oh, it's our closest call, but Miller takes it. Baczynski with the loss, Kirsten Miller with the win. Moving on to our second battle, I foresee our first one more time, somehow. If Baczynski can find, that looked like less than a half a second of raw time. Doesn't need much, but Miller with the first win, staged for our second battle. Lights are green, a little bit of wheel spin for Dana Baczynski. That's a good launch for that car. Then the VTEC comes alive in the F-Series of the S2000, goes around the high side for Miller. Now already approaching the halfway point, Baczynski is clearly ahead this time through, and it's looking like it's going to be a difficult deficit to close for Kirsten Miller. She did win our first round, but Baczynski is coming back to the line pretty well ahead of Miller. It's going to tighten up right here at the last second, but Baczynski takes the win. We are going to see a one more time in this battle. So Baczynski, our 7th seed, winning the second battle. Kirsten, our 10th seed, winning the first round. They're going to have to go again, which means we're going to immediately go into our one more time. Baczynski back to the back straight, Miller to the front straight. Both of these cars on Bridgestone tires, nice and warm already. Kirsten up on the chip just a little bit, and then a green light, a big bog at the start line for the S2000, not enough torque for that. Baczynski, though, gets a good launch. He's got to be fresh and up to speed at this point now through the pinch point into the 3-cone slalom. Miller is slightly ahead. This is about what it looked like last time with a big slide for Baczynski out of the 3-cone slalom. Miller looking more comfortable starting on the front side of this course than the back side, but gets a little behind coming into the 3-cone. Baczynski's going to get it back at the last second. Yes, I would say Baczynski took that by a bumper. We'll see what the judge comes with. And the judge agrees. Basinski with the win on this one more time. So that means if he can win this one more time, he'll be good to go. He looks a little confused on the format. He needs to come back to the start-finish line. Basinski loops it back around. Maybe that was some strategy to cool the tires off. I don't know. Commentators are supposed to speculate, right? Lights are red, they are yellow, and we're green on this one more time battle. Basinski with the advantage has won one of two, and he looks to be more comfortable starting on the front straight. Miller, however, last time had a big mistake and fell behind. Basinski's slightly ahead, but Miller's much closer this time. She works her way into this really tricky braking zone, and Basinski is looking like it's going to be his, but gets behind into the 3-cone as well. A tricky pinch point, and it's Miller. I think Miller took that one. I believe we're going to go to another more time. I'm going to dub that. Man, these guys are going to be tired after this first round. Miller knows she took the win. These guys seated very, very closely, guys and gals seated very closely, 7th and 10th. And so far we are on 2 more times. Second more time? I don't even know. Red lights on, Miller ready to dump the clutch. Big wheel spin at the line, but still bogs slightly. That S2000, honestly, I think is losing most of its time at the start line. Basinski is ahead this time. Both drivers getting thrown off at points throughout this course, but they're becoming more and more familiar. The mistakes are going to become less and less. That was almost tied across the start-finish line, and it looked like a cone wiggled for Miller, but we are safe. Basinski is looking a little bit ahead, and he is going to take the win. Basinski with a pretty clear margin of victory that time through, so it's so far a copy. It's hard to say if that cone was knocked down or not. If it was, that means that I think that means they think they're eliminated, but I think we're going to run one more to give them the chance to get a clean run. So I think that would have been a cone on Miller, which means Dana just needs a clean run to take the win this time.
All right, I guess the first one to hit a cone loses, so Dana is the winner.
Oh, correction. That's actually going to be what we thought. The first person to hit a cone is immediately the loser of the round. It's a DNF and an elimination. So all that for naught. We're going to end that one on a cone. Miller to the losers bracket, the consolation bracket. And it's going to be Dana Basinski moving on to the second round of the main winners bracket. Kevin Romanesco was our second qualifier. He has a bye round, which means we're moving on to the second round of competition in the winners bracket. Andy Smedegaard was your top qualifier by almost 2 seconds, and he will be on his first run right now. He got a bye on that first time through. Headed up against Megan Kaler, who won her first battle against Aaron Dukes. Dukes hitting a cone, but was, I believe, slightly faster in that round. Smedegaard getting a little bit of heat in the Yokohama tires on that car. And I believe he will have to do an extra lap past Megan, as he has not seen this course yet, even though he designed it. And Megan has seen it, so a sighting lap for Smedegaard. Again, the top qualifier here, he had a bye. And we'll be now into the next battle in the winners bracket. Are you guys doing more winners first, or are you doing losers again next?
We're going to do one run of the winners bracket, and then we're going to switch to the losers bracket.
Sweet. All right, we're green on the first battle of round 2. The top 8 winners' cars. Smedegaard is clearly ahead across the back straight. Again, your top qualifier by over 2 seconds, nearly 5 seconds deficit back to Kaler, where she qualified as your 9th seed. Smedegaard already back in the much faster nitrous-powered S2000. Kaler back to the line second. They will loop around. After this battle, we're moving on to that consolation bracket. So we'll see, I believe, Aaron Dukes and Nick Murphy headed up, if I'm not mistaken, for that first round of the consolation bracket. Kaler is staged, Smedegaard is staged. We are red, 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 yellow, and green to the second battle here, Smedegaard clearly ahead the first time through, and you can see the power difference in that car. Just pulling ahead before they even break for the first corner. Smedegaard back through the three-cone slalom across the start-finish line with the advantage. Kaler, though, a little bit closer this time, looking to hold her own across the top side of now what is the tightest section of this continuous course. Smedegaard back across the line, takes the win. We'll move on to the third round in our winner's bracket. Kaler, that is elimination number 1. She will now move down to that consolation bracket. All right, our next round, it looks like we're going to do one more round of our winner's bracket. Braden Miller and Jake Rusinski. Braden Miller, this car has gotten a workout so far with Kirsten taking it so far against Dana. But this is your 5th seed against your 4th seed. It's going to be a tight battle here. The MX-5 was slightly quicker in qualifying for Jake Rusinski. Braden Miller a little bit slower, but not by much. So this should be a pretty good battle. Weirdly enough, the MX-5 should take the advantage on acceleration, but I think the S2000 has a little bit more oomph up top. Braden on the back straight, Jake on the front straight. Yellow lights out, we are green. A good launch for both drivers. Looks like Braden not quite as much bog as we saw from that car a little bit earlier. Dead nuts even so far as they navigate Speedways 2 and 4 respectively. Braden gets a little wiggle coming into the three-cone slalom, but he is visibly behind Rusinski with the advantage big time coming into the second portion of the lap. Through the last offset into the three-cone slalom and will take the win in the first of 2 battles. Jake Rusinski in the MX-5 takes the win. Braden Miller just a couple car lengths behind, but it was pretty close. It looks like the drivers starting on the front straight gain an advantage early and lose it right at the last minute through that three-cone slalom that slows you down, whereas that back straight is very fast, almost completely wide open from the exit of Speedway 2 into Speedway 3. Lights are out, we're green, big bog at the start line this time for the S2000. The MX-5 is away clean. Both drivers on the binders getting through the first corner of their courses. Jake Rusinski into the three-cone slalom. Braden Miller across the midway point. He has the advantage. This could be another one more time for this silver S2000. That car is getting everything it's got worked out of it today. Rusinski, though, maybe you're going to be able to claw it back at the last minute. Oh man, Braden Miller takes it just by a half a car width or less. Rusinski was not able to claw it back. I didn't see if there was a mistake maybe on that run, and I'm surprised even with the bog at the line, Miller is going to be able to take the win. One more time, we're going to rerun this one. Rusinski, your 4th seed. Miller, your 5th seed. Yellow lights on, yellow lights off. We are green. Another good launch. Looked like a little bit better hole shot for the MX-5 driver that time. Rusinski reacting quicker to the green light by my eyes. Miller now into the high side, through the offset into the three-cone slalom, and Rusinski well ahead. Visibly further ahead by a couple of car lengths than he was last time through. So I think the MX-5 driver is going to be able to take this one if he can stay clean through the three-cone into the finish. And sure enough, the MX-5 takes the win. The S2000 with the disadvantage going into the second battle of this one more time. All right, Miller staged. Rusinski rolling up slow. Comes to a stop. Red lights on. There's no consistent. Really? This one too? I lost power on that one too. Test, 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 test. Test, 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 test. Test, whoa. Test, test. Test, test. Like that? Whoa. This is the one that cuts out. We'll try it again. All right, looks like Jake was scored the win. All right, yeah, I know. Fighting the PA microphone here. This is going to be so weird. Now I'm just talking to myself. No PA anymore, but Jake Rusinski taking the win just by a bumper over Braden Miller. We're moving on to our next track. Tony Kavadik and Mike Vita look at the STI launch into this course, then has to woe it up really quickly, a little bit clunky through the 3-cone slalom. Kavadik ends up coming across the line first, but this is looking pretty promising for Vita, as Kavadik now has to go into the tighter section of this course. Can he get the boost spooled up? Vita with the win. The all-wheel drive launch takes him to victory over our third place qualifier, Tony Kavadik from third, Mike Vita from sixth, but it's Vita in the STI that's going to take the win. Moving on to the second battle. Skipping it so much. All right, it's Kavadik and Vita. Not the best launch for Vita that time. A little bit of a bog for the turbo on that STI. Kavadik looking nicely ahead this time through. As I say that, Vita claws it back really quickly. This might be a big upset. 6th seed taking on the third seed, and just as we suspected, the all-wheel drive of that Subaru coming to live. Oh, and Vita takes it. He's going to move on in the brackets. Kavadik is eliminated to the consolation bracket by less than a car width. And that, I'm hearing, is the first pursuit format loss for Tony Kavadik. This is our third event of this style, and that's a big upset. Well done for Mike Vita in the STI. Moving on in the winner's bracket. Here's our final battle of that winner's bracket. Dana Baczynski in the red FRS versus our bye round, Kevin Romanesco. He was our second qualifier and had a bye in round number 1. So here he is for the first time on course in the Toyota Supra, taking his sighting lap. Baczynski, already having seen the course, takes his place on the back straight. Now Romanesco, this is I believe a Supra automatic, which means it'll do the shifting for him, good for launches. A lot of power in that car, and it's on some Bridgestone sticky tires. So I believe this will be a very difficult challenge for Dana Baczynski to overcome, but we've seen upsets just happen. Kevin Romanesco a little bit cold. Dana had a bunch of rounds to get familiar with this course, so we will take our last battle of the second round in our winner's bracket before we see that consolation bracket come out. Yellow lights are on, green. A good clean launch. Again, that automatic Supra already in third gear before the first brake point. Wraps it nicely through the first bit of Speedway 1 and 2. Baczynski is now into the slalom. Very familiar with this course, but Romanesco is visibly very far ahead already, as we expected in that Supra. Wraps the top side of Speedway 3 and 4 nicely into the 3-cone slalom. And as long as he stays clean, it's an easy win for Kevin Romanesco in the Toyota Supra in the first battle. Second battle coming around, both red cars making their way to their second start-finish line. As we have slight raindrops from the sky kind of coming and going, nothing yet to wet the course, but it is still threatening rain at any moment, which would tip the scales even nicely further for Mike Vita in that all-wheel drive STI. But it's Baczynski versus Romanesco on course. Yellow lights off, green lights on. A little bit of tire spin for the BRZ, but it's a clear launch, grabbing third gear again for the Supra before the first brake point. Baczynski holding his own nicely this time. Romanesco a little thrown off by that 3-cone slalom, and Baczynski with the advantage. Could we see another one of those upsets? That red BRZ just loves its one more times. A big slide, gathers it up, and a DNF for Baczynski. He was probably going to hold his own, but had to bail out after the rear end stepped out. Kevin Romanesco will take the win and move on to the third round of that winner's bracket. And that's going to move us on to our consolation bracket. That should be first round battle we're going to see out today in the consolation bracket is Jade, what happened? I lost it. No. Jade Baczynski and the Civic. That should be Nick Murphy. So Jade Baczynski, your 13th qualifier. Nick Murphy, your 12th qualifier. The advantage should go to the Civic just slightly. Gets a little behind in the 3-cone slalom. Advantage to the Corolla. Oh, and a DNF for the Civic. The Civic driver DNFs and takes out a cone. That's going to be an automatic loss for the Civic of Nick Murphy. And that is his second loss. He will be eliminated from the bracket. That is going to be a win for Jade Baczynski by default after a DNF and a cone down for Nick Murphy, celebrating coming back to the line. And again, this double elimination format means that you get a second chance, and honestly, looking down the bracket, the winner of the consolation bracket gets a chance to come back all the way to the final round. So we're going to run a second round, even though the loss is already determined, just to give these drivers their time. Murphy way ahead this time. It's unfortunately DNF'd because the advantage is definitely to the Civic driver as Jade Brzezinski now on the brakes into the second portion of her lap through Speedway 2. But Murphy is back first by a long way, and it's an unfortunate heartbreak for that driver with getting just a little bit lost on this autocross course. Ends up DNFing the first round. I believe we declared the loser, even though he took the win in that second battle, just as kind of a consolation round. Fist pumping across the line for Jay Brzezinski in the Corolla. Will continue on to battle, I believe, Megan Kaler, if I'm tracking this correctly, but we'll see. Next battle is on their way up. We're going to have Civic Type R versus first generation twin. And that is going to be Nick Lemeron versus Dan Simmons. Simmons in the FRS, Lemeron in the Type R. Got a chance to drive that car a little earlier today. It's on all seasons, so it's not the best handling Civic Type R on the planet, but it still has all that power. And the car has pretty decent balance, so it may not have the raw grip, but it does have some good performance. And the power advantage definitely goes to the Civic driver in this scenario versus that stock first-gen FRS. Sighting laps are all out of the way. We don't need that anymore. The drivers know where they're going, and they will be headed straight to their respective start lines. So the number 07, that FRS, not sure, that might actually be a Subaru, of Simmons versus the Type R of Nick Lemeron. A little bit of a bog at the start line for the Civic Type R. It's actually going to be a big advantage just at the start. For the car we didn't expect, Dan Simmons is going to take an early advantage as the Civic bogging through the beginning of the course. Now finally crosses the midpoint of the course, but Simmons with a massive advantage, even coming into the slowest section of the entire course through the three-cone slalom, and will take the win in the first of two battles here in our consolation bracket. And it looks like Lemeron a little concerned potentially with the car, actually bailed out of the run a little bit early. Might have even been trying to save some heat. Will now slowly make their way around to the start lines for their second battle. Simmons and Lemeron are staged, red lights flashing, yellow lights on, and we're green on the second battle. Simmons, a really slow reaction that time on the back straight, sat there for at least a second before moving. A little bit better launch for Nick Lemeron that time in the Type R. He has a clear advantage this time across this back straight with that really slow reaction time from Simmons, caught sleeping at the line. Big wiggle across his midpoint on the front straight here at Golden Sands, and then wraps the top side of Speedway 1. Lemeron, though, is going to be back first, it looks like, one more time in our consolation bracket for the Civic and Subaru drivers. That's Nick Lemeron actually eliminating himself with a DNF that wasn't called in until late, and that means that Dan Simmons is going to take the win in the FRS. Maybe a little bit of a scare for him there when he thought he lost and had to go one more time, but is indeed the Type R going out in round 2. First gen FRS, a little bit more power swapped into that red car, but I still think the whole shot slightly to the front wheel drive car, a little bit shorter gearing, maybe a little bit better launch. But Brzezinski quickly claws it back with the Bridgestone tires on that. He's going to lead across the start-finish line. No, it's actually an advantage to Aaron in the RSX. So Aaron Dukes will take a slight advantage at the midway point, but he's not able to hold on to it. Brzezinski makes his way through the second portion of the course much quicker. Dukes is basically bailed out at the start-finish line. And we're hearing because of the DNF at the three-cone slalom. Looks like he got a little bit behind and wasn't able to keep the car on course. So that means Aaron Dukes will be eliminated for the second time. He is out of the consolation bracket. Dana Brzezinski moves on. Again, we'll run this just to give them their shot. Add a little bit of extra seat time. Ooh, little bog for Brzezinski at the start-finish line. That's potentially why we saw that Acura leap ahead just slightly until the first braking zone, but the BRZ clearly a better handling car once it hits the twisty stuff. RSX, huge deficit across the finish line, maybe knowing he's already lost, doesn't need to try that hard to maximize this run, while Brzezinski is going to make every lap that he can because he's still in this competition. He takes the win. Aaron Dukes eliminated here in the first round of the Consolation bracket. Set of the day, Tony Kovacic eliminated by Mike Vida, and Vida will continue on in that winner's bracket, but it's not all said and done for Kovacic. He may not be undefeated anymore in these battle bracket, in these pursuit battles, but he can still claw his way back to the finals if he can stay undefeated through the rest of this Consolation bracket. And he's got to be the favorite right now. Maybe other than Dana Brzezinski. As raindrops are starting to fall from the sky, Jay Brzezinski is probably excited about that with the all-wheel drive, but it's not heavy enough to make the surface change yet. Just my educated guess, Kovacic roars ahead with the V8 power. A little bit conservative at the start, maybe with a little bit of a tentativeness with the rain on the surface. But again, dry grip, Brzezinski is leading at the start-finish line. Kovacic falling just a little bit behind, but now the most challenging section of Jade's lap, the three-cone slalom, she's falling behind. Kovacic takes the win in the first of two battles. She put him on notice, though. Jade Brzezinski led the first half of that battle. And it's going to be a cone down as well for Brzezinski right here at the finish, I believe. So that's going to put a nail in the coffin for Brzezinski's hopes. Tony Kovacic should be advancing on. Going to give him their last lap. And they're off. Kovacic already with the win, but Brzezinski's going to clip another cone actually in the first braking zone, putting yet another nail in that coffin. Kovacic well ahead at the midpoint. He's got to feel out these conditions. If it continues to sprinkle, this might be good intel for him. The second cone on Brzezinski now getting picked up by the course worker, and Kovacic is going to cross the start-finish line. I'm starting to actually see the surface color change just slightly here off track, so it's possible that the conditions are deteriorating just slightly. And again, we do have that interesting scenario where this dual-driven car, Kirsten and Braden Miller, if they come up against each other, one of the drivers will have to forfeit based on this format. Kirsten's already said she probably will throw up the towel in that situation, but she's on course now on the back straight. Simmons with a little bit of a bog in the FRS on the front straight. Miller is already ahead before the first braking zone. Drivers making that hard left up towards the top side of the oval into the three-cone slalom for Miller. Grip looks okay. Simmons slightly ahead, but I don't think it's by enough to make it up to the rest of this course. Miller into the easier section, Simmons into the hard section, and Miller's going to take this one pretty easily as Simmons still a little bit balked by that three-cone slalom. Miller will make her way around to the start-finish line, and I see Kirsten on the side of the course, which means this is Braden on track, and I don't know what I'm talking about. So Braden Miller taking the win over Dan Simmons. And that means that Braden Miller will come around to the start-finish line for the next battle. I believe this car is going to be in the next fight again as well against Megan Kaler. But on track, Braden Miller into the braking zone at Speedway 1, Dan Simmons into the braking zone of Speedway 3, now through a quick offset into a three-cone slalom. Braden Miller on the other half of the course has a clear advantage again. He was, I believe, your 6th qualifier on this event, or 7th qualifier, I can't remember. But he will easily take the win on this one again as long as he stays clean, and we are good to go. Heavier rain starting to fall here at Golden Sands Speedway, so much so that I'm getting wet. But this is going to make things super, super interesting, and I know one guy back in the paddock who is very excited about this, named Mike Vida. Upset already, beating Tony Kovacic. Do we need to move? Are we good? On the grid, Kirsten Miller getting in to battle against Megan Kaler. This will be a good one. Kaler taking to the course, and I believe we have had enough rain and a pause, just enough to make this course a little bit slippery. This is going to be a very exciting battle, no doubt. As Megan Kaler finds her way around to the front straight, Kirsten Miller already staged on the back straight, and then one of the battles of the day coming to the line in the third round of our winners bracket. It's going to be Mike Vita and Kevin Romanesco on a potentially damp surface. Very interesting stuff, but we got to get through this one first. Megan Kaler at the start-finish line, Kirsten Miller on the back straight. Lights are out, and we are green. A little bit of wheel spin, falls down the speedway even slightly for Megan Kaler. And again, we've had a little bit of rain. What are the conditions? It looks like they're pretty okay. Little wiggles as each driver makes small corrections. But both drivers a little bit more tentative. Megan Kaler with the advantage in the FRS. Kirsten Miller in the silver S2000 now into the easier section of the course. And it looks like Miller's going to take it back. She does. So even though it looked like Kaler had a good start to the lap, when you start on that front straight, the last portion of your circuit is the most challenging, and it really makes this thing look like the driver's ahead, and then they immediately lose that advantage right at the end of their lap. So Kirsten Miller with the win in the first battle. Megan Kaler taking the L, but will now change over to what might be the more promising side of this course. Miller with a pretty good launch, not a lot of bog out of that S2000. Looks like Kaler was a little slow on the pickup potentially at the line. Kirsten Miller with a huge advantage when they come across the halfway point. But again, coming into the slower section of her lap, and we can start to see a dry line even starting to form. So there is definitely a little bit of a surface change, but it's not slowing them down too much. Big mistake at the last minute for Kirsten Miller. Almost threw it away, but still takes the win over Megan Kaler. That is elimination number 2 for Kaler, and that will put her out in this consolation bracket. Kirsten Miller will move on. I'm not sure if that means that we actually had that dual-driven car now come up against itself, but we'll have to see how that plays out. Mike Vita and Kevin Romanesco, the Supra was your number 2 qualifier, has only done one battle so far after a bye in round 1, and will start on the back straight in that automatic 6-cylinder Supra. But I think the driver to watch right now might be on the front straight. It's Mike Vita in the all-wheel drive Subaru with potentially slightly slicker track conditions than we saw in qualifying. We'll have to see how this one plays out. Drivers still have to keep it clean and keep it quick. Lights are green. Oh, and a huge launch for Vita. There's definitely a little bit slick on the paint there. He spun all 4 wheels and had a huge advantage off the line for it. No bog at all. He will lead across the halfway point, but now comes into the more challenging section of the track. Romanesco looking a little bit tentative, very, very early on the brakes into Speedway 1. Meanwhile, it's going to be Vita DNFing. He missed the course. Vita on the wrong side of the first cone in that 3-cone slalom and throws it away. And he had that one too. He was ahead coming into the 3-cone slalom, but it's going to be Kevin Romanesco taking the win based on the DNF there. Just a little lapse in where this course goes. We'll give the Supra the win. Staging around for the seat time run. Kevin Romanesco is the winner of this battle, but the lights are on and the lights are off. Another launch for both of these cars. Probably pretty even on acceleration rate once they get moving. Vita finding his way through the 3-cone slalom that time, but it was not necessarily the smoothest run through there. It looks like Romanesco with a huge advantage so far into the 3-cone slalom already. Can Vita claw it back? Not. Oh, he did. I think Vita beat him back to the line. It's all for naught with the DNF on the first run, but I would give the Subaru by maybe the badge width on the front bumper the win in that second battle. If nothing else, just for, make it feel good. All right, so moving on, our top qualifier back on track, Andy Smedegaard in the GLTC Prepped Trainer 2. Pushed with a little bit of nitrous through it against Jake Rusinski. He was your 4th place qualifier, I believe, in that MX-5. Had a really tight battle with Dana Pazinski and was able to claw his way into this 3rd round of the winner's bracket. Smedegaard on the front straight, and Jake Rusinski on the back straight. No rain falling anymore. It looks like we're probably going to be clear now of weather condition changes, but the course does look just slightly slipperier. Big wheel spin across the paint for Smedegaard, trying to put the nitrous to the ground. On the brakes early. This should be a pretty easy victory for kind of our ringer in the payout event here for the ASM Autocross Pursuit Battles. Smedegaard easily clearing the finish line before Rusinski at the halfway point, clean into the 3-cone slalom. And will shoot across the start-finish line at the top of 2nd gear. Rusinski comes in a couple seconds later. as expected. I believe these drivers qualified approximately 3 seconds apart to the advantage of Smedegaard. So really, the only job for the driver in the S2000 is to stay clean. It's his event to win if he does so, in theory, but it's easier said than done with so many cones to hit, so many needles to thread on this course. Rain falling again, this is staying interesting, going to change track conditions slightly. All that nitrous in the S2000, could it make it a little tougher to drive? I think both cars on Yokohama tires should be pretty good in these conditions, all said and done. Smedegaard slightly ahead. No, it's actually Brzezinski that is a little bit ahead at the midpoint. Probably not enough to offset the slow finish that he's going to have here through this 3-cone pinch. Smedegaard does climb back, but a valiant effort from Brzezinski within a second or a second and a half, I'd say, of Smedegaard that time through. We do see a cone slightly moved, but not knocked over. It was in its box, so we'll ignore that. Everything good. And that means Smedegaard coming out on top once more to go into that, I believe that's going to be the final 2 in that winner's bracket. And that should be our top 2 qualifiers, Romanesco and Smedegaard, if memory serves. Moving back to our consolation bracket, Kvatić versus Brzezinski. This is an interesting one. 2 drivers that probably fell into that consolation bracket just based on really difficult battles. Neither of these drivers are a slouch. So it's going to be Brzezinski starting on the front straight. Nope, Brzezinski picks the back straight, and Kvatić to the front straight in the Corvette. Now, both drivers on Bridgestone tires, both cars mildly prepped for this, not necessarily all-out race cars like the S2000, but we have, like the S2000 is, but we have an interesting condition change since the last time these drivers saw the course, and I honestly think this might play to Brzezinski's advantage just slightly. All the extra power in that Corvette is not going to be as useful as they get going big wheel spin across the paint. And the car starting on the front straight having some challenges with getting power down just at the very green light. But Kvatić is navigating the course nice and smooth. He's going to come ahead, well ahead of Brzezinski across the midpoint of the course. Brzezinski now full throttle into the second braking zone at Speedway 1. Kvatić navigating the 3-cone slalom already. Ooh, this is going to get tight. Who's going to get it? Kvatić by a car width. I believe the Corvette takes the win, but Brzezinski made it close there in the second run. What's going to be interesting is if it seems like it's a little bit easier to win from the back straight. Just based on the flow of the course, it makes it look like the back straight is a little bit easier of a battle than the front straight, which is why we're doing both runs. And if Brzezinski can kind of, obviously that doesn't play into Brzezinski's advantage if I'm correct, but hey, if I'm wrong, it might play out really nicely for him. Kvatić, a big roar away, no wheel spin that time. So he goes across the high side of Speedway 3. Brzezinski is already through and way ahead. Maybe I'm completely backwards on that. The front start line might be a little bit easier to win from. Is Brzezinski already wrapping the top side of Speedway 3 and 4? 3-cone slalom. It's a horsepower race. Brzezinski wins it. And it's going to be a one more time between the Corvette and the FRS. They made a liar out of me. I think that start-finish line side might be a little bit better. It's going to be a one more time for Brzezinski and Kvatić. Yellow lights on, green lights on. One more time between Tony Kvatić and Dana Brzezinski. Kvatić a little bit more careful, but actually looks tidy through Speedway 1 and 2. Brzezinski, though, a really good run. Has a little bit of deficit, but has been able to claw that back just slightly in the past, and he's looking like it's going to be promising. Brzezinski, a big wobble for the finish. Ooh, I'm going to have to wait for the starter's eye on that one. I'm not actually sure, but I think it's Brzezinski, unless that Corvette got up on the cam and made it to the line back. We're actually having to check video just to see on the photo finish, and it is indeed Brzezinski taking the win in the first battle of this one more time. But we had to check footage just to see if that's accurate. Sure enough was Brzezinski on the front straight, Kvatić on the back straight. Surface is going to be drying out at this point again. A lot of wheel spin for Brzezinski at the line that time. Kvatić, though, nice and clean exit onto the outside of Speedway 3 and 4 into the 3-cone slalom. Brzezinski with a heavy advantage. This is looking promising for Dana. can keep that momentum up. Deep on the brakes into the high side for 3 and 4. Kavadik looking just a little bit floundered through these tight offsets with that big car, but he does make it back. It's going to be another one more time for Basinski and Kavadik.
Tony got that one. The Corvette got that last train.
These guys racing for their event. Again, the winner of the consolation bracket does get to go for one more consolation run against the winner of the winner's bracket right at the very end to see if they can take the win. One of these drivers could become that person, or for that matter, it could be Braden Miller or Mike Vita next up on deck. This is our second one more time. Tony Kavadik and Dana Basinski just beating each other up here on the pursuit course at Golden Sands. Kavadik with the advantage, as we'd expect. This is about where they've been every single time. It's hard to say, really, who has the advantage until the last second. Even with a photo finish 2 runs ago, Basinski gets a little behind, flounders a little, and Kavadik will take the win in the first round of this another more time. All right, so a second battle, Kavadik taking it easy back to his start-finish line on the back straight. Basinski on the front straight. We have FRS versus Corvette. No classes at this event, it's just run what you brung. Everyone on 200 treadwear street tires. We've done 3 hours of practice, 3 runs of qualifying to get to this point. The winner's bracket is still yet to be contested, but this, one more time in the consolation bracket for Dana Basinski and Tony Kavadik in the black Corvette, Basinski in the red FRS on the back straight. Just as we'd expect, Basinski with a slight advantage at the midway point of the course, but Kavadik now coming into that section where he seems to, it looks like he's working really hard, but he's got that section down. Kavadik. Ooh, I don't know, another photo finish. I have no idea.
This one's really close, holy shit.
Not even the starter hesitant to make a call on that one. The photo finish right at the flagger's stand. Zooming in from all angles, checking pixel to pixel. The starter not willing to make a call. It's being declared, it sounds like a tie, even with the photo finish. I didn't expect that in a quantifiable motorsport, but here we are. Potentially just a tie for one more time. Although if it's a tie, I might argue that the winner of the first battle should take the win. I'm not really sure what the powers that be will decide there, but I believe it was Kavadik that won the first battle, and then a tie potentially being declared for the second battle. So it sounds like we're going to maybe run one more time on just that battle. If the battle was too close, so it's still advantage to the Corvette. And we're going to one more time the one more time after that other one more time. I don't know how many more times we can do this. We are in the top 4, I believe, of the consolation bracket. Any 4 of these drivers could make their way into the final round. Kavadik, interesting launch that time. It was either a perfect launch or a little bit of a bog as that car really lumbered away from the line. Basinski is slightly behind. I'd argue that's the furthest he's been behind, but he's fully on throttle across the start-finish line midway through the course. Fully sideways, trying to make up any bit of momentum he can. Kavadik looking nice and smooth, and it's going to be the Corvette that takes the win again. That should be the final one more time that we are seeing Tony Kavadik, I believe, taking the win after a tie being declared. We're declaring just a rerun of that. Although both drivers restaging, we may be redoing this whole battle. Looks like we're going to run them. We're green. Basinski launches from the front straight. Kavadik on the back straight. Kavadik with the advantage in this battle. He has won the first of 2. This is their 3rd more time going after a tie. Basinski slightly ahead. I think Kavadik is pretty close. This may be the final run. Basinski's going to have to be inch perfect for the rest of this run, but I don't think he's got it. Kavadik gets back by a car length, and we finally have a winner of this round. Tony Kavadik knocked out early in an upset by one of these next drivers, but is fighting his way back to the top. He's saying, no, I'm still Mr. Pursuit, and I'm going to get back there. But Moving on next, I believe this next battle, from who I see standing trackside, is Braden Miller versus Mike Vita. Vita with an uncharacteristic mistake, DNFing himself out of the winner's bracket when he was arguably the car to beat in that round. Finds himself in the consolation bracket, but again, he could find his way back to battle Tony into that final spot just before we declare an overall winner. Braden Miller on the back straight in the S2000, he has had, maybe other than Dana Baczynski, the more times declared for him in that car. Really a slow launch for the S2000, or potentially just the Subaru is that fast. Vita clearly way ahead by the time they hit the brakes for the first time, and he's working his way back to the start-finish line already. This should be no contest, but he's got to stay clean, deep on the brakes up the hill at Speedway 3. Now he's got the slow portion of the course. This thing is going to get really tight. A beautiful pivot into the 3-cone, and Vita DNFs again! The 3-cone slalom is not his friend. He misses the final 3-cone and will lose this battle to Braden Miller, who has found himself up into, I believe into the final, at least the final 4. I think we still might have 5 drivers in this consolation, so we might have a bye at some point, but I've lost track of my own bracket. All right, a rerun just for fun. It's going to be a big clutch slip maybe for Miller. Maybe a couple too many launches on that car in too short a time. But Vita, a big quick launch. She's got to make up for bragging rights on this one. Grabbing 3rd gear and then a quick downshift into Speedway 1. Runs really wide and DNFs it again. He's going to call it there, back into paddock. Maybe that car just getting a little pushy, or maybe just a little hot at the end of this day, fortunately for Mike Vita, which is going to give them the default win to Braden Miller on both rounds. 3rd and 4th qualifiers, both of these cars very capable of taking this whole thing. Tires are going to be hot on that Corvette after all those times rerunning against Dana Baczynski. Jake Brzezinski has been sitting for just a little while. The track is definitely going to be dry as the sun finally comes out here at Golden Sand Speedway. Corvette on the front straight, MX-5 on the back straight. Red, yellow, and green. We are going for, by my measure, this is the final round of the consolation, or potentially the top 4. I don't remember which. Across the back straight, well ahead of Brzezinski. He is absolutely in the zone at this point. Must know this course like the back of his hand, the Corvette driver and the MX-5 driver both. And it's a cone for Brzezinski. He's going to be eliminated. Jake Brzezinski catches a cone in Speedway 2 and will lose this round to Tony Kavatic, which should advance him into at least the final 2 of the consolation. We're going to rerun this to give them their track time. And we are green. Again, as long as Kavatic stays well, no matter what, because Brzezinski was the first one to hit a cone, he will be out. But can at least get some bragging rights. Kavatic looks like he's taking it very easy just to keep it off, keep the heat out of the tires. Rolls across the midway point, so he is clear and good. Brzezinski pushing hard, getting every last bit of fun out of this event. Across the start-finish line for the MX-5, Kavatic takes a voluntary loss to save the car for a couple more runs. And this should be the final. This should be the final consolation battle. Now I believe I'm up to speed. It's going to be Braden Miller and Tony Kavatic. Then we should see Kevin Romanesco and Smedegard. And then the winner of the consolation bracket will battle the winner of the winner's bracket to determine our overall winner. So this is S2000 versus Corvette. Miller starting on the back straight, Kavatic starting on the front straight. That Corvette has certainly had its work put into it. By that matter, the S2000 as well. Being dual driven deep through the consolation brackets here. Kavatic was your 3rd place qualifier. Have to imagine the advantage goes to the Corvette by raw pace. But again, we've seen bigger upsets. We've seen DNFs. anything can happen, and the pressure has got to be on at this point for these drivers. Kvodic looks a little clunky in Speedway 1, I gotta be honest. But a big wobble through the three-cone slalom for Miller. It's looking like it's not going to matter one way or the other, as Kvodic is way ahead at this point. Miller's going to try to claw back at the last minute, but it's too little too late. Loses by 3 or 4 car lengths at the line. Kvodic will come back around with the advantage for the last, hopefully, potentially anyway, the last battle of this Consolation bracket. Green flag flies, green lights on at least, and the S2000 driver, the Corvette driver, both navigating the high side of the Speedway through the three-cone slalom and the start-finish line, dead nuts even across the halfway point of the course, which means that I believe the advantage is technically to Tony right now, and he shows us we are right. Crosses the start-finish line with a DNF at the last cone for Braden Miller, pushing for everything that S2000's got. It would have been a loss either way, as Tony Kvodic takes the win in the Consolation bracket. He will go on to face the winner of this battle, the top 2 in our winners bracket. Andy Smedegaard versus Kevin Romanesco. Very different cars. Automatic 6-cylinder Toyota Supra versus a race-prepped Honda S2000. Probably about 1,000 pounds difference between these cars, but maybe as close as 100, 150 horsepower advantage to that Supra, which has got to help here at the launches. Now, Romanesco did dial into the brackets 2 seconds off the pace of Smedegaard. So again, Smedegaard, it's his event to lose. It is all about staying clean. He doesn't need to light the world on fire with pace. Romanesco, on the other hand, needs to dig really deep for this one. We're going to need a good launch, clean run, and as fast as that car has gone, grabbing first, grabbing second, grabbing third into the first braking zone. Very even at the start. Romanesco looking tight and tidy, but it's going to be a slight advantage at the back straight. Smedegaard now across the start-finish line, running out of second gear all over the rev limiter in the S2000, and it looks like that car is a little behind. He's going to get back to the start-finish line. I think by a bumper width. We're going to have to consult the video again. Waiting for our starter to declare a winner. That one got really close with the power at the very last minute.
Okay, we're going to give that win to Romanesco.
The win being declared, the Supra takes the first round at the last minute. The turbo spooled and he grabbed third across the start-finish line to take the win by a bumper over your number 1 seed, Andy Smedegaard. Maybe dialing in a little bit more NOS, a better launch for sure this time, as we are now deep into the braking zone of turn 1. High side of the Speedway for both cars, quicker side for Smedegaard, slower side for Romanesco, and I think Smedegaard's got this one by a couple car lengths at this point, grabbing a downshift from third to second and a cone. Romanesco blows it into the braking zone, throws it away, I should say, into the braking zone. A cone down will be a default win to your number 1 seed, Andy Smedegaard, taking it in the S2000. Only one driver in his way to become the winner of the ASM Pursuit Battles, and that is Tony Kvodic. All right, so we are going to give a little bit of a moment for mainly Tony Kvodic to cool that Corvette. It's got a lot of runs on it back-to-back. Those Corvettes do not necessarily love that, especially beating on them in autocross like this. So he's going to let the car cool down for just a moment. Smedegaard going to let the car do the same. Romanesco will be your 3rd place finisher, 2nd place in the winner's bracket, and a great effort. I've been there myself, needing to dig for every last 10th. You hit a cone, try to make it happen. It's definitely a valiant effort, but it's going to be Kvodic versus Smedegaard. Now, this is interesting because Smedegaard is essentially a spoiler in this event. ASM hosted, we put a bounty on this one, and it means, hey, you got to beat me for my own money. He did enter, he's a participant like everybody else, but he's also the host, and he's going to hand Tony Kvodic the prize money if he wins this round himself. Versus, on the flip side, Tony Kvodic is undefeated in these pursuit battles on all other occasions. He's won the first 2 events we've done in this format. So this is definitely an interesting battle. He's fought his way all the way back to the Consolation bracket to come to the top 2. This is his last chance to prove that he is still the king of these battles, in these pursuit battles. But he's got to race Andy for his own money, basically, in this last round. But before we get there, little flub on the format on my part. It's actually going to be a heads-up battle between Romanesco and Kvadic before Kvadic can get to Smedegaard. I think that's how that works. So the Corvette is cooled off, the Supra is warmed up. And now we will determine who wins the $200 for second place, and who is relegated to third. Kvadic looking nice through the first high side. Romanesco a little bit behind across the start-finish line, as we would expect. Just got to wait and see. Can the power of the Supra come back? No. Kvadic takes the win. Romanesco loses by a car length at the start-finish line and didn't quite have enough oomph through the last corner to get across that start-finish line. So Kvadic is really on a tear right now, all the way through the consolation bracket if he can beat this one more battle. Supra on the front straight, Corvette on the back straight. Lights are on, yellow and green. Here we go. Final battle before the last run of the day. Big charge up the hill for Tony Kvadic. Romanesco looking tight and tidy. 3-cone slalom for Kvadic. He knows that entry like the back of his hand at this point, but it is the Supra with the advantage. How is this going to play out? The Supra into the tightest section of the course. Kvadic is kind of free and clear to put his foot down, and he takes the win. The Corvette driver does it. Takes himself back to the finals through the consolation bracket. All right, this is getting interesting. Now there's a question on the radio whether or not you still have to lose twice, which I think means that Tony has to take Andy down twice to technically win this event, but we're waiting on word on that. Either way, Nos being prepped in our #1 seeds car on the front straight, Andy Smedegaard in the S2000. Kvadic has fought for his life back to the finals. He still has a chance to take Andy's $300 back from him. Either way, Kvadic going home with some cash. Smedegaard grabs the top of Speedway 1 through Speedway 2. Kvadic is looking nice and clean, but it's a big advantage for Smedegaard. These cars are a little over 2.5 seconds separated on qualifying, so we should see the S2000 easily take this one, but he's taking big risks on the cones. He wants to put the nail in the coffin, and it's Smedegaard taking the win in the first of 2 battles. Kvadic maybe three or so car lengths behind by the time he came across the start-finish line. So once again, we've speculated all it needs is clean runs. The S2000 should be the faster car. Kvadic, on the other hand, has to dig deep. We saw Kevin Romanesco knock himself out with a cone in this exact scenario. He needed to be inch perfect and as fast as he could. Big launch for Kvadic. Driving second gear into Speedway 1. Smedegaard, however, flowing nicely through the top side into the 3-cone slalom. Kvadic with the advantage. This is what we'd expect, but we don't know how this is going to play out. Smedegaard all over the rev limiter in the top of second gear is trying to claw his way back from that last little bit. Big wiggle, and I think Smedegaard by just maybe a quarter car width. It was almost nothing at the line. Judges comparing the photo finish just to confirm. That one was really close. A great run from Tony. Definitely putting Smedegaard on notice, but the judges are declaring Smedegaard did make it back just in time. Maybe 2 feet to take the win. So it's going to be your overall champion, Andy Smedegaard at the ASM Pursuit Battle. Second place, Tony Kvadic. Third place, Kevin Romanesco, taking home $300, $200, and $100 respectively. We're going to have to see if Andy maybe dumps that in the pot for next one, huh? Keep that bounty going. As it were though, thanks for tuning in, and thanks for hanging out with us at Golden Sand Speedway.